All right. So, Kavishma, I have a few questions to ask you this time around. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Locofy, which we have been using more in the studio. Um, and Locofy is interesting for a number of reasons. It's playing on the idea of automating uh, design conversion to a front end CSS. And this is an idea that has been floating around for a long time, for almost 10 years, I think. There were earlier applications like Macaw, I remember, and even Adobe Muse was trying to do this as well. But I think what has changed in the last 2 years, 1 to 2 years, is AI, and that is what Locofy has. It has AI baked into it, and it's a application that you can use through a plugin. You can plug it into Figma, and Figma is, of course, we all use. It's the industry standard at this point. So, what's your hot take on the concept of translating designs, first of all, to automate that whole process of taking the colors, taking the fonts, putting it into a CSS framework, uh, the principle of automating that process, even the layout, of course. So,
Okay.
uh, and what is the follow-up question to that is then what do you think of Locofy, and has it succeeded where so many others have failed?
Right. Okay. Thoughts on automating, the design into code, right? Personally, I do think that it's a good thing. In a way, what I mean is like when you take a project, there's a lot of grunt work that goes into it, like setting up the foundation of it, right? So when you have these automation tools that come in, what it does is it's not trying to replace a developer, rather it's trying to supercharge your developers to sort of, get your grunt work out of the way. So you waste less time coming up with, things like variables and colors and things like that because they're already set up for you and it's just a matter of converting them. I do think that we're not at a stage where we can confidently say that these tools work because for the most part they can be very messy, and the code that they spew out can be very unconventional, I would say, but it does speed things up a lot, which is the case with Locofy. I think Locofy is a good tool for what it is now, but I do think that there's a learning curve that's involved with the plugin. If you're a company or a startup or even a customer trying to convert your design into code, what you need to keep in mind is that when you use these tools, you're not trying to, you might think that you're trying to cut down on the time it takes to develop something, but you're still increasing the time it takes to design something, which is the case with Locofy. With Locofy, when you get into the plugin, you have, as a designer, you need to do a lot more work. So I'm going to give my opinion here. So this is just an assumption that I'm making. So I'm thinking for the most part, a lot of designers don't use components. A lot of designers don't name their frames. A lot of designers don't make their designs responsive. We tend to keep things quick and easy, right? If it's responsive design, we have a desktop design, we have a mobile screen, we have a tablet screen. We don't try to make things responsive on the same frame. With Locofy, it tries to enforce this. So as a designer, you need to do a lot more work with your design. You need to name your frames appropriately. You need to tag things. You need to make sure every single thing is responsive and is auto layouted. So and you need to make sure that you use components because that's the fundamental part of something like reusability and React and things like that. So for what it is now, I think it's a good tool for you to jumpstart things. But I do think that as a designer, there's a lot of work that you will have to do on behalf of the developers to get things up and running. As someone who loves to code and who has a bit of coding knowledge, setting up Locofy was quite easy because I knew what I wanted to do, because there's an option with Locofy where you can write code on the plugin itself, right? But then some might find it frustrating. And as someone who loves the flexibility of coding, I don't like the idea of having an interface where I can choose what I want to do. Whereas, it's different when you're coding things, right?
It's kind of like you're taking the art out of the whole project.
And it's very limiting as well if you think about it. Now that I'm just talking about it, like as a designer, you need to make sure that your design sticks to like a particular template of sorts, right? Which is essentially what you're doing with things like Squarespace and Wix and all those website builders, right? So it can be a bit limiting as well, because so those are my thoughts on the design conversion part and Locofy itself. I do think that these tools can get to a point where I don't think any tool will replace developers or designers. I do think that it will help you to get things done at a faster rate, which is what these tools are for. So I do think that it'll get to that point where you can just click on a button and not worry about anything. But for what it is now, if you look at things like Locofy, Framer, right? You will have to manually tweak things, even though it does automate the code. You will have to, as a developer, you'll have to go into the code and restructure it, or add functionality to it, or adjust things that might, not make sense when it's generated by AI, right? So there's still that manual process in that automation as well, I would say. Yeah.
Do you think if in the coming years, as AI becomes more baked into our daily life, and if there is more an effort to put AI into these systems, that it can come to a point where it can break those limitations, those templates that we talked about, where say if a client wanted to make a very custom design, and you believe that an AI can proactively come in and say, yeah, we can break this component here, I'll handle that part of it for you, so that a designer doesn't have to come in, or a developer doesn't have to come in manually to do it?
Yeah, I think if you really think about it, a couple of years back, let's say 2 years back or 3 years back, I don't think we would have, we would be in this stage where we would think that an AI can generate code, or things like ChatGPT existing and doing all the research for you, right? So I do think it's possible to get to that point, because what they're working with now is just the foundation of it. So if you improve it, and if you improve the algorithms and everything else, and the more time it takes for the AI to sort of get the references it needs, I do think it's possible for an AI to be more creative and to be more ambitious with what it generates, right? So it's not totally impossible. I do think it'll get to that point, but never to a point where it'll replace someone or a field, I would say. Not at this stage, but definitely can be more, less limiting and more creative, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. There was an interesting point there where you talked about, it's somewhat escaping me, so I'm trying to catch it.
Okay.
So it's like a feedback loop almost, where an AI is only as good as the humans who make things, because the AI is learning from us first, as opposed to us learning from AI. So in a perfect world where we have completely given up this process where it's automated, where okay, we do the design, we hand it off. There is a bit of an overlap where, okay, if the AI can do this part of it, if it understands the principles of this, then it can just do the design part of it as well. because it understands the whole structure, right?
Yeah.
So where does it end and where does it begin, basically? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. You need people to constantly innovate in order for the AI to constantly keep up. If the AI is the end all be all, then it's just like it's feeding off its own sort of database, data sets or knowledge or whatever that is, right? So I'm agreeing with you in the fact that, yeah, it will never replace a developer or a designer, because that ingenuity comes from the human spirit. I mean, that's corny, but like that's where it comes from. A developer will be able to understand how to develop faster or develop more efficiently than an AI ever could by itself.
Yeah, I do
So,
agree. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was gonna say like it comes back to that point where what I meant was like it won't get to that point where it'll replace somebody, right? Um, but I don't want to say it's not possible either, because you never know at the rate at which AI is, improving, right?
Hmm.
And it's like this. I'm not an AI expert, so I don't know how it works.
Neither am I.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, if you take ChatGPT, for example, if you were to write a prompt and if you were to correct ChatGPT, it's something that it would learn off of as well,
Hmm.
based on
Yeah,
other references as well. So
yeah,
even with your errors, you know, even when you make an error, there's that possibility of, the AI
course
coming
correcting.
in and exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do think that it'll get to a point where you don't really need human supervision at all for it to learn off of. I would say that it would have that freedom to sort of correct itself and figure things out by itself, which is
Hmm.
essentially what it's doing now as well, right?
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Yeah. Replacing things is a scary thing. I know a lot of people are worried that their field will get overtaken by AI and it'll replace, the jobs and things like that. But I don't think we're at that stage where it'll take over your jobs, right? What it
Hmm.
is now is a tool for you to build off of and learn off of and make things more efficient.
Hmm.
And especially with development, right? In the context of development. In terms of art and things like that, I don't think that it's applicable, because I think we're a lot more creative than what these tools are producing, right?
Yeah.
Even with
So,
design, if you look at like the things that like Framer's AI generation tool, for example, right? You give it a prompt, it'll generate a website for you. But those websites look the same for the most part. None of it
right now,
has exactly
right
right
now.
now. Yeah, right now. Yeah. None of it has that, that uniqueness to it, that
Hmm.
personality to that design, right? Which is something that we can do because we get a requirement and we know exactly how to process that requirement and turn it into something good.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
at this stage, it's just a tool for you to build off of and learn off of and grow and make things faster. So I don't know what the future will hold, but it
Hmm.
is what it is for now. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to keep an eye on Locofy and see, and I'm sure there must be some other similar tools that are doing this as well, because everybody has been trying to make something to make this part of the process feasible for a
Yeah.
long time. So many applications. I mean, so many. Um,
It, it's
yeah.
it, it's just that like it's okay to use these tools, but what people don't realize is that, like I said, it doesn't you know, cut down the time it takes to develop something. Because for the most
Okay.
part, you'll find yourself tinkering with the code as well, whatever it
Okay.
generates, right?
Okay.
Um,
That's a useful insight.
yeah, and with Locofy, I think that's the case, because
Hmm.
as a designer, you're doing a lot more work now in the design process.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So you might be cutting down a few hours with development, but
Development.
you're adding more hours into design as well.
That's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
So that's the case with Locofy anyway. So you're optimizing a lot more things on the design to make it work for development. So that's where the I would say the gap is. But yeah, in the future, I think I'm hoping that these things, will get cut short and is made more efficient. But for the time being, it's not flawless. It's very flawed. Yeah.
I actually had not thought of it in that way that, yeah, we are a design studio, so we are working with Locofy on the design part side of things, and we're
Yeah.
finding that there's a lot more work to do that's kind of
Yeah.
outside of our normal process. So it's not just setting up the Figma files and setting up the components and setting up the layers and stuff like that. Those are things that we do project to project. Some are more neater than others, but Locofy demands it. It actively
Yeah.
requires it. Without it, Locofy cannot work. So
Yes.
you're creating a dependency where there was none before, where you could, if you have clean collaboration between a developer and a designer, uh, that friction may not even exist, where you can hand off
Mm.
items very seamlessly if you know how the other person works.
I think another thing that Locofy forces you to do is that it takes you out of Figma and it forces you to work on that plugin, right?
Mm,
So you're
mm,
essentially working with two tools here. You
mm,
have the design on Figma, you're taking it to the plugin, and on the plugin itself, you need to start doing things like making it
mm.
responsive and tagging it. So that workflow is a bit too much, but it's an extended workflow.
Yeah. I'm going to say that Figma will bake this into their system eventually, because that's where they've
Yeah.
been heading all this while. There,
Mm.
you are able to generate your basic CSS. You're able to do variables that allow you to, do dynamic dark mode, light mode, kind of. You have people experimenting with these variables, with these components to such a high degree that
Mm.
eventually Figma will just bake it into the normal sort of flow. Like eventually you will be able to do responsive by just resizing the frame on your design. You
Yeah.
will be able to, you can do it even now, I mean, but it's just that
Mm.
the export option is not there,
Yeah.
and a reliable export option is not there.
Yeah. I
I,
mean,
I mean,
the current dev mode they have is really solid for what it is now. And
mm,
I do think that they'll bake this in because this is a really good opportunity for them to take advantage of. And it forces us as designers to then improve as well,
mm,
because it'll sort of force us to make things responsive and work with
yeah, yep,
components, name things properly, which is a
yep,
good thing, I would say.
mm,
It's the next step, the next evolution, I would say, as a designer.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. For a UI UX designer, for sure.
Yeah, for a UI UX designer, yeah, definitely.
I think on the previous call, we discussed how everything is online. And that was a fascinating topic. And I found this, it's not even in beta, it's basically still an alpha service. It's
Okay.
called, it's called, I believe they are going for data, but they have spelled it
Okay.
DETA. So it's
Beta. Okay.
data, yeah. But I don't know. From a branding point of view, I'm thinking they're going for data. I don't know. So the domain is data.space,
Okay.
and basically they're pitching an online OS. It's an online operating system. So
Okay.
as opposed to having a browser to access the internet, which is disconnected from the local files that you have on your computer, this is a push for your entire operating system, your files, your personal documents, whatever that means. It's all on this space called data, and
Right. Okay.
it's an interesting premise. I'm pretty sure that it has crossed minds before. I mean,
Mm.
everything being online is already a part of like the Windows and the Mac OS systems to some degree. Like Copilot now uh, feeds off the files that are on your computer and actively prompts based on your calendar meetings and your calls and all of that. There's a bit of that element going on already where there's an overlap between your online life and your local life. So this is sort of like the big bang grand vision that, hey, what if everything was online? If your OS was online,
Right.
what would it look like? So you have
Interesting.
all these, if they have some form of a file browsing system, you can create apps. That was
Okay.
the interesting part of this, where you can proactively just, I'm not sure if there was an AI, I'm sure there was an AI part of it, but you can just instruct it to run a command and it will create an app for that command. So
Okay.
I want to see a library of cats,
Okay.
and it will create an app for you. I think that was the premise. So
Interesting.
you're no
Okay.
longer installing software; you're generating it on
Oh,
the
okay.
go.
Right. Okay. Oh, that is very interesting, actually. So, for example, if I don't want to go on Pinterest, I can just ask it to, you
Yes.
know, generate a mood board with a couple of images, and it'll have that app ready, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
That's
because
very
you're already
interesting.
online. You don't need to go on the browser to access Pinterest. You're already online. It's you're just touch and go. It's sort of like that. And I think that I know my opinions on it. But
Okay.
what's your take on this concept? You're checking it out, right, on your side?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. Um, because this app thing really took me took me by surprise. They have this feature called so at any time you can wipe your data um with the press of a button, which I think is pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, it says every app has its own collection that you can extend, export, and wipe, which I think is really cool. So I'm
Hmm.
assuming that for the apps that you create with the system, it'll have its own,
Hmm.
like what you have with normal apps, right? And then you'll
Yeah.
be able to erase it and you'll be able to backtrack as well, which I think is really cool.
Yep.
I think this is a really solid idea. It okay, when I say it's a solid idea,
Hmm.
it's yet to be decided, I would say,
Yeah.
because
It's in alpha still.
exactly, yeah. Um, so I'm interested to see how they pull this off, I would say. So, but yeah, for the concept itself and the way they're pitching it, I think it has potential. Um, but then I'm sure it'll have its limitations as well because it's
Mhm.
an operating system, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I'm interested to see how they sort of navigate through those hoops and convince people that this is the way forward, right? Because to me,
Okay.
this feels like it's not just an operating system, it's a choice, a big choice that you're making. Um,
Hmm.
because to move out from Windows and Mac OS is it's a
It's an
pretty big
uphill
step.
battle. It's an
Exactly,
uphill
yeah.
battle. Yep. Yep.
So how they keep up with that and what they do, I'm interested to see. But it's pretty interesting, the concept, I would say. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that this is, the way forward, and do you think there's potential for this to be like the new norm in the digital age? What do you think?
So there are a couple of different technologies that come to mind. I mean, I think everything being online is going to be the norm. Um, but there could be a hard push for privacy and security, so that there's a there's a very aggressive push for you having a local operating system in the future. But as I'm seeing it right now, it's definitely everything's online. That we have reached so far that I think it would be a regression to have like a device that is not connected to the internet. Anyways, and I read an article, I can't remember where, but it was relatively recent, and they were talking about social networks specifically, how
Okay.
social networks which are privatized right now, where if you have a Threads account, you have a community there, and
Hmm.
then you jump to Facebook and you have a community there, and they have different ways of doing business. But for all, it's two different spaces, like, so to speak. So
Yeah.
that will, the article was arguing, I think it was a Verge article.
Okay.
Let me quickly bring it up. They were arguing for a breakdown of that, where you have a library, you share content in a central space, which is what they were saying was um, a website or a blog. And
Okay.
from there, you syndicate your content. So you push it out into Threads, Instagram, Facebook, whatever that needs to
Right.
be.
Okay. So it's like a
So
single hub for all
that's
the
essentially what
social
they were
platforms,
saying.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you really think about it, like there are people who just come online on a PC or a laptop or a phone just to get on the internet, right?
Hmm.
There's nothing else that they might do outside of it, I would say.
Hmm.
So I think this is really good. I think this would be a really good OS for specific devices as well. So I think that there will be people on the market who will have this OS installed and who will market it as an internet only phone kind of a thing, um, which I think would be interesting. So you don't have to meddle with, going to the Play Store or Apple Store and installing things.
Hmm.
And it's just a matter of, okay, you switch on your phone, you're up there. So that's the whole
Hmm.
purpose of it, right? So I
Hmm.
think,
Hmm.
I think a lot of devices will take advantage of this if it becomes a big thing. And at the same time, I do think that there's the potential of Windows or Apple taking this and baking this into their existing operating systems.
Hmm.
And then not rebranding it, but giving you an option to, let's say, for example, I'm not familiar with Apple or Mac OS,
Mhm,
right? Let's say
mhm,
Windows, for example, you boot it up for the first time. You have two options. Do you want to go light mode or do you want to go, advanced setup or something like that? I'm just
mhm.
giving out
Spitballing.
ideas, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's say the light mode is just a basic version where it just gets you on the internet and you don't have to do
Mm,
anything else.
mm,
You don't have to install any apps. You don't have to worry about, getting things up and running, signing into things. It just gets you on the internet and you're free to do whatever you want, right? So
mm,
there's a chance that they might do this if this is the way forward. And if this takes off, there's a chance that they might incorporate it. Apple is known for, taking good ideas and, marinating it for a while and then implementing it to their system. So I
yeah.
do think that there's a potential here for existing systems to take advantage of as well. So those are just my thoughts based
Yeah.
on what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And more specifically, I think if for the audience, maybe for them to picture what we are picturing, the benefit of having an always online operating system is that you can synchronize across devices. So, for
Mm.
example, if you have a MacBook right now, if you have a MacBook and you have an Android phone, they both exist separately because the OSs are separate and they are installed on the device. But if you have an OS that is always online, then everything is synchronized across devices theoretically. So that's a
Yeah.
huge benefit. So, like, if
Mm.
you're by accessing whatever homework or project or assignment you were doing on one device, you can just throw that aside, walk into another room, pick up another device, and boom, you're still on the go, you're
Mm.
still on the run. You're not signing into an application to access the file that you were
Yeah.
browsing a few seconds ago. uh, so it cuts down that whole process, in a lot of
Mm.
ways. So that's what we're really talking about when we talk about always being online, because that's
Yeah.
the benefit of Figma is all online. You can jump on your iPad, access the or a tab. You can access the Figma app and you can just pick up where you left off. Of course, the editing tools are a little different, but the
It's the
work
same file and
continues.
all the work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the work continues and it's just seamless. So I think the future for an online OS is very interesting. Yeah.
This is totally not on topic, but I kind of like the Verge website. They're doing an interesting thing with the header. like that the big logo, right? It's actually
Oh, you mean the
clickable.
word specifically? Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the word specifically, yeah.
Okay, okay.
The header part is pretty cool. Like they have this huge logo and it's actually
You
clickable.
you know what? Let's do like a design review because I have thoughts about the Verge website. I
Okay.
remember the old Verge website and I was pretty excited for the update because I remember very clearly because I always go on this website. It's part of my morning routine. And I loaded the site up and it was like really fresh, new,
Okay.
like it caught me off guard. Okay, but the more I used it, the more I kind of missed the old website because I, of course, they have done their market research and they have gotten the feedback, and that's speaking to a particular audience. But um, yeah, so I will tell you I'll give you my
Yeah, I'm
opinion,
interested to hear. Yeah. What do you
but
hate about it? What do you like about it? Yeah.
I'd like to hear your off the cuff thoughts first because you may be familiar with it, but I have just put you on the spot, so I'd just like to see what you
Right.
come up
Okay.
with.
Um, okay, first thing, I do like the new navigation they have going on where you have like all the sections and the tags that you can just navigate through, which I think is pretty neat.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, when you click on more, there's a side now that comes, you can search for stuff. Pretty good. I kind of okay, so this might be like a personal thing. Not a big fan of broken layouts when it comes to content reading websites, right?
Hmm.
Um, a good example would be a good example of good design, I would say, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Inverse, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I do think that's even though they're going for like a bit of a broken layout, they have things organized properly and it's pretty good. But this just feels like too much information.
Hmm.
Because they
You're
have
talking about
this.
as you scroll down as well.
Yeah, I'm talking about as you scroll down, like you have these
Mm.
cards saying most popular and then just for you, and
Mm.
then on the side there's something else, and it's a bit confusing. I like my things to be very organized, very straightforward when it comes to,
Mm.
a website, right? Um, so inside an article, yeah, the article page is pretty straightforward. And there's the menu thing. Yeah, okay. It's pretty decent. I do like the menu a lot, I would say. That's because it's easier to navigate now, right? I'm not familiar with the old Verge website, but
Hmm.
for what it
It
is
was
now,
very
like,
different. If
is
you
it okay?
access polygon.com, I believe it's part of the same media group. Though
Okay.
I do believe that Polygon is unchanged. The theme was very similar in terms of the layout.
Oh, the card system, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how the old Verge used to be.
Okay, so this is a pretty big design change, right? Because
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So I remember they had done an article to commemorate the update,
Okay.
uh, and they had done up basically a rationale for the change, and that was interesting and respectable because they were trying to evolve the media format, the publication format. They acknowledged that Twitter, or back then Twitter at least, the application was a massive source of news and opinions and thoughts from the community and from the public at large. So they wanted to incorporate that naturally into the UI for the website. So
Okay, interesting. Mm.
so all of those anecdotes where you see the Twitter embeds,
Yeah,
that's where that comes from. To me personally, I have no interest in that. I just want to read the articles.
same,
So
yeah.
for me, the first section is really great. You see the main banner and you see the accompanying articles. But when you go down, it kind of loses me a little bit because
Yeah.
now I'm hunting for the information, and my eyes don't go to the big blue block there, the most popular block. I have to force myself to go there to look for the articles, because I still think the left hand column takes up a lot of real estate or
There's a lot of
attention.
text on it, which I
Yes,
don't like. It's
same.
meant to be
Yeah.
very compact and for you to digest easily, right? But here there's a lot of text. I'm assuming
Mm.
the Twitter embed thing you're talking about is this so if you're on the Verge website, right? If you look at the first thing where they're talking about the evil within,
Yes.
is that a card for the blog article? Oh, it is. Okay. What is that, a Twitter thing?
Seems
What
to
is
be an
that?
image.
No, when you click
So
on it, at least, yeah, it takes you to like a different page. So is that on Twitter or what is this? Is this like a
it
separate
looks like
blog
a post. It looks just like a
post,
post,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Mm.
is unnecessary, right? Like,
Mm. You know what? I've never even clicked on one of these before.
because it's just posts and
But overall, I really like their colors, their choice of
mm,
font, and just the general fact that they are willing to break the norm and be on the cutting edge. Because
yeah,
even just technically, they have done some very interesting things. A lot of attention to detail for a lot of stuff. Consideration of labels, the color of the labels, what should be
yeah,
clickable, what should not be clickable. Most of it is very intuitive for the most part. Um,
yeah. Like you said, they're breaking the norm, which we
yeah,
appreciate. We love when
yeah,
people do things different.
yeah, yeah. And I think the Inverse website that you mentioned also is one of those. They also had a
Yeah.
refresh recently, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I really love the Inverse website.
Mm,
It's not like I said, like we're so used to the typical platforms, like the way things are laid out for you when it comes
mm,
to reading articles and things like that. So when you get
mm,
into something like this, it's a totally different experience,
yeah,
and it just makes you think like they're just doing things different, and that's something we like.
yeah. Another common thing between Inverse and The Verge is consideration for the thumbnails as well. I believe that they
Mm.
make custom thumbnails for most of their articles. So there's that added layer of oomph almost. It screams
Yeah,
quality.
and it aligns with your design as well, right? Because you have freedom
Yes.
over how your thumbnail looks like, and yeah, I think that's
Yes.
great.
Okay, so I think that's about our time on episode 2.
This is a shameless plug, but hope you guys checked out the previous episode. Leave
Yep.
us any feedback, any comments on how we can improve and what we can talk about, things like that. We're always happy to do this. This is really fun for us. So we're always looking to improve. So thank you so
Yep.
much.
Yep. 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 Looking forward to the next one.
Same.
And we're done.
Done. Great. I'm going to stop recording.
Stop.